Welcome back to Better Than I Deserve. Today we're going to be completing a cycle preparation that we did a few videos back. If you didn't check and see, we had dropped a video about duck eggs, and I kind of gave a behind the scenes look of the preparation that some items go through in regards before we are putting them in the freeze dryer, as we do mostly, or actually all the time, are freezing things prior to it going into the freeze dryer. And I just find that that is such a helpful, useful tool, and it helps the freeze dryer because it cuts down on that pre-freeze time with everything being pre-frozen. So, but in that video, I went ahead and scrambled and sectioned out, I think it was 10 duck eggs, I can't remember, but we blasted through the rest of them because they are so good. If you had not had a duck egg before, I definitely suggest that you try and get your hands on some. And I realize that's not always easy to do, but they are just jam-packed full of nutrients. And in that video I talk a lot about the facts and information and comparisons between duck eggs and chicken eggs. And if you haven't checked it out after this video, go back and take a look at it. It's not too long, but in there we went through the preparation and pre-froze the duck eggs that we did for this video, for the cycle that we're about to do. And along with that, we have several different items that will be going in: some breakfast, some fruit, and some soup and sauce items. There's a couple other things in there, but we didn't want to overcrowd things, as I learned from the video that Philson and I did before that. Our cycles were very long and there were so many issues, but this will be about keeping myself in check and not doing too much at once, and keeping things as simple as possible. But we'll move over to the freeze dryer to get it cooled down. I'll go get the food to show what it looks like before going in for the cycle today. Now that we have our freeze dryer started, it's measuring at about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, which is what it is in the house. With the door open, usually it's the same temperature as it is out here. But in 15 minutes, we will be able to load the trays in, and I'll let you know what the temperature is. I have noticed, since we are coming up on doing between 20 and 30 cycles, our freeze dryer is getting a little dirty. So in the near future, after this cycle or another one, we will more than likely be having a video about maintenance and cleaning your freeze dryer. So if you are on the freeze dry train with us and have not done that yet, we will be the guinea pig to show how that process goes. But hopefully we can get through this cycle without too much mess, and we will check back here in a moment with our food. Here is the food that will be going in today. As I said, our main item is this very full tray of duck eggs. There are approximately 30 little cubes of duck eggs, and if you caught that last video, 3 of the cubes equal 1 duck egg. So the idea is to weigh these cubes, 3 of them precisely, to find out what they are freeze dried, so then we know how much water to add. I believe our average size egg was 69 grams, so we would want to get it to 69 grams and figuring out how much water to add to that. As I've said in previous videos, when we have used and cooked with chicken eggs, I think that the 1-to-1 is a little low. I feel like the egg is always thicker than if you just cracked an egg and scrambled it. So we'll do some comparisons eventually, but I do want to make sure that we weigh those, and we'll see eventually if we plan on powdering them or keeping them in a cube state, at least for this stage. But moving on, our top tray has a variety of delicious herbs of sage, thyme, and rosemary. I don't think you can see it at the top, maybe you can, but those have turned out incredibly when we've done them in the past, and obviously I want to bulk up what we have since we have been using it a lot. And in the middle, those are not bars of soap, they are soup, and it is a potato leek soup that we made this week, and They are in half-cup increments. I used one of the soup cubes. I will try to remember to link it in the description. They are super useful. As you see on the next tray, we use them again for some spaghetti sauce we made with the items that we got from our CSA. And it was more than this. We just froze them in serving amounts for when we have spaghetti, and this is what we had left over. So I went ahead and did half-cup increments because I didn't want it to be too much for the freeze dryer to handle. So we will go ahead and see how that turns out. Shared on that tray, looks kind of gross, but it is oatmeal. It's steel cut oatmeal that was cooked. There's nothing else in it, just water, salt, and steel cut oats. My hope is that we'll just be able to add water to it, and of course other ingredients that we enjoy to have in our oatmeal, and see how that tastes in comparison to having it freshly cooked. And if that's good, I would love to try it again with our favorite fixings in it, like milk or cream, maple syrup, cinnamon, and maybe some nuts and things like that, so we could basically have a on-the-go meal for breakfast. The item that's shared on it is a good bunch of dill that has been treating as well, and this will help to bulk up our herbs for the remainder of the winter season. And our final tray here are the apples. They are cinnamon dusted apples. This is a red envy apple. I think there's like 2 or 3 on here. But it's like a cross between a nice crisp and sweet apple. It's delicious. So good variety, not too overflowing trays. Try to keep consistent things with our 3 items here that are pretty, cubed and like a liquid form. And of course, I know that our herbs will get nice and crispy in there, hoping that everything else does along the way. So we'll go ahead and get all of the trays into the freeze dryer, and we are at 40 degrees Fahrenheit, so we have dropped 30 degrees since we did our pre-chill. So we will go ahead and get these in before officially starting. Now that we have officially started our cycle, I of course, as always, want to thank you for watching our videos and checking out the channel. If you have seen any of our other videos recently, it's been full of some quick videos, some shorts as they call them on here, and there have been some technical difficulties in the background. We had a major issue with our water hydrant outside, and it's been since fixed. Brad is, I am sure, a very well-educated person when it comes to an Apex unit, but maybe one day we'll put out a video of how to do that. But it was very stressful, and it was figured out on our anniversary that there was a leak that turned into a much larger one, putting upwards of 300 gallons of water into our yard and flooding it. So always something exciting here, but I am glad to say that recently it's been pretty chill, knock on some wood, but we are glad to be back in the freeze dryer to get back to some fun food things and share. We will see how all of this food turns out tomorrow. It's the next day and our food is done in 30 seconds. It's amazing. I was able to add on a specific amount of extra dry time when I came down earlier. The unit was already done at about 17 hours, and that just wasn't working with our schedule for today. And as usual, like I have said in the past, you're able to add or subtract more dry time as needed. So that is a perfect tool for us with a little one and things going on. And right now, it actually just switched into done mode. So you'll hear a slight beeping in the background. We'll be able to move over there, release the pressure valve, and check our food. I will be leaving the trays in until it is time to package that food, but we will verify, at least to the touch, that our food is dry, and we will package each one at a time. Just as we have learned from the past, sometimes things aren't going as we plan. Ensuring that the food is done, if it's not, leaving the unit on while we're packaging up our food makes an easier transition if you need to turn the freeze dryer back on to continue the cycle. So we'll move over and get started with our next step. Moving Moving over to open up the door, as I said, we will need to release the pressure with the drain valve. On the screen, it lets you know the total amount of hours that ran for this particular cycle. With the added time that I put on to make it work with our schedule, it was 21 hours and 19 minutes and some change. Right now we're at 116 degrees Fahrenheit, so those trays are nice and warm. As I've said before, when you do extended time, sometimes it can go between the two of hot and cold, especially if you haven't added extra time on. It doesn't know when you're going to be doing anything, so it will fluctuate a lot, but it's nice and warm, so our hands won't be ice cold. Pressure is released, and as I normally do, I always take the hose out of the bucket just to make sure there's no extra moisture that would suck in, and as soon as it's done, I place it back in the bucket so we don't forget. Now we can open up our door very easily, and we'll be able to check our food. A nice warm tray. And this first one is our herbs and our potato leek soup. So of course, I have a good feeling that the herbs are always nice and done. The soup, I'm not sure. It still feels pretty heavy, so we will continue on and check that. We're gonna move on to our other things though to make sure. Our next tray is the dill, oatmeal, and the spaghetti sauce. So as usual, dill nice and light. The oatmeal feels really good, one crispy bit. And our sauce feels good. It still feels kind of heavy, like I said in reference to the soup. So this may not have been the best option to do it like this, but again, we will investigate further to see by breaking it and kind of going that direction. Our duck eggs, our 30 individual piece duck eggs, feel nice and light. I don't feel anything that might be an issue, but once again, we'll probably sacrifice some to see and confirm that they are done. I'll put them back in for now. Like I had said before, we will be weighing them and comparing that to the weight prior to freeze drying them. It was definitely important for me to get a good idea of what is a good amount of water to add. As I had said, the chicken egg just always seemed a little thick in comparison to what it was prior to freeze drying. And our final tray, our apples, and those feel rather good and crispy, so I will go ahead and probably do this tray first as we feel very confident that they are good, and we'll go ahead and shut our door. As I said, we are going to go ahead and do our apples first. They look great. A good little cinnamon dusting on it. As usual, I'll give it a taste test. It almost tastes like there's sugar on it with that cinnamon based on this type of apple, I'm thinking. It's really good. I think that will be a huge hit. I think we're going to get lucky and it's going to be a perfect fit. I love it when that happens. And we are good to go. Those are delicious tasting. As I said before, I believe it's called a red envy apple, a cross between two apples. I'm not sure without probably looking it up. That would probably give us the best and quickest answer, but that is one of the best apples that we have done in freeze drying so far, I think, easily. But we will move on to our next tray. I'll probably leave this one out to have something else to go on to because it's going to get a little messy as we break up some of our other items, but we'll move on to our next tray. Our next tray is the herbs and the potato leek soup. As I said before, the herbs normally no problem, but our soup, we definitely want to make sure, since we have not done something like that before. The positive sides of doing a soup and when you go to rehydrate is you can make it as thick as you want. This may have been a little bit on the watery side as I didn't let it boil or simmer for too long because we were hungry, but there are whole pieces of potato in here as well. So when we go to rehydrate this, as long as it's something that worked, this can be made into a thicker soup, like I said, or it can be thin, or if not thinner than what we originally had it at. So they were done in half cup amounts, and we'll go ahead and get our herbs packed up first, and then we will address the soup next. I've been having a great time saving containers for certain things that I have in mind. Brad actually found these at the store. They had a delicious chocolate pudding in them, and they're the perfect size for herbs like we're doing right now. Oh, it smells so good. This would be delicious on top of bread or crackers if you're doing it. I have so many ideas in mind, but not enough time as usual. There's a good chance we probably have other herbs upstairs, so some of these jars might get combined once we bring all of this up when we're done. And we regularly use these herbs as I'm trying to cycle out the standard store-bought things that we have done and had in the past for as many things that we can do for our regular go-to seasonings. So here is our rosemary in our little chocolate pudding jar, but it's perfect. It's glass with a metal lid and that rubber gasket inside. Definitely imperative when you're trying to keep things fresh. For our other jar, I'm going to go ahead and put both the thyme and sage in here, and I'm going to be putting the thyme in first and then the sage on top of it. These are things that definitely are cooked with a lot at the same time for us, but upstairs, like I said, I believe I have other leftover thyme, so I'll just add this to it, and the sage will have its own jar, because I think this is the first time we have freeze-dried sage, but it is beautiful. It doesn't actually have a lot of scent to it once you freeze dry it, but to me, when you have fresh sage, unless you're really rubbing it to release those oils, you don't really smell it all that much. But the thyme smells incredible. It has been our go-to of things recently for so many recipes, like the soup that we'll be doing next. If you have not done herbs and you still have a lot left over, like especially ones like this, I recommend doing them. They would be great in all of your Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday recipe baking. I mean, you're talking, unless you have like a greenhouse or like a indoor garden, you're talking the most amazing freshness guaranteed from your own growing. So now we have our thyme at the bottom and our sage on top, and like I said, we'll be combining these into other jars when we get upstairs. Now comes our potato leek soup. 3 perfectly square bars. My idea at this point is just to break it in half and see the consistency inside, and we'll get a good idea if we need to stick them back in and continue the cycle for more dry time. And right off the bat, we will have to continue more dry time. More than likely what I'll do is I will cut these into smaller pieces. Most of this is dry, but that inside center, I'm so bad at that, but just to see if it will. Right there in the center it's all ice cold, which means you have moisture in there still. So a learning curve since we have not done a thicker liquid like this. So I'm going to go ahead and put this tray back in just so it doesn't continue to absorb moisture, and we'll move on to our next tray and see what we're going to do about these when it comes time before restarting that cycle and adding more dry time. Like I said, probably cutting them up to make it easier for it to penetrate inside. Our next tray that we're going to do, of course, I want to address the spaghetti sauce since it's essentially the same type of situation as our soup. But we'll go ahead and get our dill packaged up and our oatmeal, and I'll probably be crushing this down a little bit more to put it in a jar so we'll be able to add water into it easily if we are doing this test on the go, or it'll just be easy to pull out and dump into a saucepan to rehydrate and cook. Another reuse jar that we have acquired for our dill, it should be the perfect size, and a glass jar with a metal lid and a gasket on it. It's been working so well. The only thing that I found that hasn't turned out, I was super disappointed, and it was in a standard mason jar with its lid, was the avocado pieces we did for our guacamole tray. Now, obviously, it could have been user error, as we have seen how I thought some things were done. So maybe there was a culprit of a piece. But when I went to try, I was going to do a video on guacamole making with that avocado. It had a funky smell. The pieces were not crisp. They were kind of spongy. So right off the bat, I did not feel comfortable trying it and poisoning us. So maybe we'll try smaller pieces next time and really spread it out to kind of give it a test. But I'm hoping one day to get that to work. But we did make delicious guacamole with fresh avocados and the remainder of freeze-dried ingredients that we had. Here is our dill, a nice full jar. We do have lots of freeze-dried dill, but we use it quite often for salads and a lot of recipes with orzo and lemon and chicken. It's delicious. Our next jar that I'll be doing for our oatmeal, and like I said, it's just a nice little light brick cracker basically, and that was steel cut oats with water and salt, nothing more. And eventually I want to test out adding other ingredients if this rehydrates well and tastes good. I mean, obviously things can rehydrate well and have the similar consistency, but if the flavor's not there, there's really no use in doing it, especially because oats like this keep well until you cook them. They're basically already shelf stable before cooking. So this was more just a convenience factor. So I broke them up into smaller pieces, and I could crush it more, but for what we're doing, it's our little test here, I'm not too worried about that. I have had people ask why we're not using like darker jars, but all of these are being kept in cabinets to keep them away from light. And when it comes to anything that's for pantry use, we are trying to use it within the month that we're making it, so there shouldn't be too many issues. Like I said, with the avocados, I think that was just user error, or it could have even been a faulty lid. You never know about some of those things, because since we're not doing any sealing, maybe that is something that we look into to get a piece with our vacuum sealer to seal these jars to help ensure that they are indeed keeping oxygen out. But something tells me it was my fault, not the jars. All right, our next test of items with our spaghetti sauce that we made. The spaghetti sauce has been delicious. We've been having it from a frozen state and just defrosting it. But as I have said, I love to experiment. So I have a feeling we're going to be in the same situation, but we'll go ahead and break this open and see. And yes, once again, cold. So these will go back in for now, and we will address them here at the end before we continue on. So here are our duck eggs. Obviously, this could be the same issue that we had with the soup and the tomato sauce, but we will make sure some will be sacrificed into a powder right off the bat, and more than likely that is how a lot of, if not all of these, will go after I weigh them. It is important to me that we do that, since we took weights and got a good average before we freeze dried them. It is important because we want to add water to them to rehydrate them for cooking or baking, or just, you know, straight up egg eating. So we'll go ahead and move into that, and we'll give a light touch here. That's always a big thing. If you feel something cold. Now right off the bat, I don't feel the tray as cold as the freeze dryer is going through its cycle of cold. We're now at 34 degrees. Since I haven't canceled it, it is just in a holding pattern. So now we're going to hold the tray. It was very chilly when I pulled it out. So our eggs feel good. Now we're going to break one open and feel inside, and it does not feel cold, so that's a very good sign. So with the new scale that Brad got for us, we are going to measure in grams. We'll go ahead and weigh 3 of our little pieces here to get an idea of what they are after being freeze dried. So around 19 to 20, which amazingly is exactly what I predicted. That's just pretty awesome. So that would mean if we were keeping with our idea of rehydrating these and getting back to the original average that we started with, we would need 40 grams of water. Now, one of these on average is about 5 to 6 grams. Let's try another one, just a random one. That one's 8. So everything is not going to be perfect at this point. Okay, I'm trying to think if I crush them. So as I've sat here and thought about this quickly, if I go and put these into our jar and I crush them into a powder, I know that I need 19 to 20 grams of powdered egg, and then I'm doubling the water to get it back to its original state. That's crazy. In regards to when it was the chicken egg, that is not what the standard has been said. So we might look back at that in, go for that in another video to really do a comparison, because 1 tablespoon of powdered chicken egg to 1 tablespoon of water, I don't think is accurate. I think it's an under amount of water. So we will put these in a jar and label it so we know that 20 grams of powdered egg is equivalent to 1 regular duck egg once you add 40 grams of water. So I hate math, but we're doing it and we're making it work. So kind of my quick crush and smush method. It's crazy. These eggs are very different feeling than a chicken egg. It's way creamier feeling even after being freeze dried, but I feel good with the way these turned out, and before they get brought upstairs, I'm hoping to add a note to them so we know 20 grams of powdered to 40 grams of water and you are back at your original state. Working quickly here to make sure we can get our cycle started again, I brought down a very sharp knife to try to get as equal parts as possible in regards to having our soup cut back up. It smells interesting. Alright, so we're going to go just down the center. That's our biggest issue right off the bat. And we can check our other pieces. Yeah, and kind of from about a ½ inch in on each end, that whole bottom middle is still cold. The bottom doesn't really feel it, so it's just that inside part. So we'll do that, and then we'll probably cut it a total into 6. So let's get that going. Separate them. Here. Learning how things go. If they would have been in smaller or like thinner pieces, that would not have been a problem. So if I would have used the super cubes and just put a little less each and added it to our other ones, we probably would have been fine, but I like to push it to the limits a little bit to see how it goes. So we have our cut up pieces of the potato leek soup to go back in, and we will go ahead and pull out our sauce now. As I start to feel this, the bottom of this one feels pretty cool. The top feels definitely dry, so let's break into it and see what we got. This might capture a little bit better since the sauce is darker, but you can tell it's almost like a candy bar. Like this is the nougat center, except this is the frozen center that should be dry. But we will chop this into fourths at this point. It's funny when you think things are done, but they're not, that you act like and think that you are learning from your mistakes. But at this point, it's just to try things out, learn from them, and hopefully help somebody else out there. I will not stop using those super cubes, but maybe think of a different way to incorporate them in with, a different way of either keeping things thinner Or now that our sauce is cut up, we'll put it back into the freeze dryer with our soup, and we'll be adding more dry time. I am probably going to do at least 4 hours, but we'll see. Maybe the freeze dryer will catch on that there's moisture to pull. Since we did it the last time and I just let the cycle go over the whole night again and did it the next day, I didn't pay attention to the idea if it was sensing the moisture that was in the food or how that was, since we had to start a whole other cycle. So we will put this in and I will let you know what's going on. After I put the food in and closed the door, selected more dry time, it reminds you to close the drain valve, which I probably would have forgotten about. So that's always a nice reminder. And then I pressed continue on the screen. It gave immediately an hour and a half of extra time on there. So that might be factory setting and something that you can change in the settings. But obviously, you can just press the arrows, because on there it allows you to add more time or less time immediately. I went ahead and set it to 4.5 hours, kind of a happy medium between the 4 to 5 that I was thinking. So with the amount of moisture that was left in there, it wasn't a ton when you were considering overall how much moisture was in the food to begin with. So I'm hoping that that is enough, but we will check back on that in 4.5 hours and see how it's going. It's later on now, about 4.5 to 5 hours later, and the machine is letting us know it is complete. So with that added dry time, I'm hoping that our soup and our sauce are thoroughly dry and ready to go for packaging. We'll probably be putting these into some Mylar bags for packaging, mostly since we had to break them up into a bunch of small pieces. It's just going to be more convenient to do that, and I'll label it as specifically as I can for, you know, reference when we get to use it. But we are looking forward to sharing a lot of other videos down the road, some things with pumpkin and some things with some organ meat, ideas of incorporating them into our diet without the flavor. So we look forward to sharing that with you down the road, and we will move to the freeze dryer to finish packaging up for today's video. The first tray that we pulled out is our potato and leek soup, and as I said before, the idea is to make sure that they don't feel like anything. You don't want to feel cold, you don't want to feel any wetness or anything like that. So here's hoping that as we dig in and try these out, that it doesn't feel like anything. Well, with a bit of shocking news, the first piece that I broke open, it's not a lot, but there still is some, I guess we'll say, crystallization and some cold spots, which I am just super surprised by. And without getting too in depth, if I find one, that's enough for me at this point to realize we need to put it back in. And at this point, we'll just let it go overnight. It's pretty late already, and confirm. I will go ahead and check that tomato sauce, but since we have one thing running, I'll probably let the other thing run. But we will go ahead and put this tray back in and check and see how that tomato sauce is. So here are our individual servings of tomato sauce now, and I can definitely see a color difference from where it was dry. We cut it open, it was still cold and not done, and like where it's probably completed its portion. Let's see if we can look at that like stratification almost. But you can see it's like darker on top, lighter, and then darker, almost like a layered cake or something. So that individual piece that I'm trying there feels good, and I'd say without a doubt these pieces are probably done. But like I said, since we're continuing to run this, I'm going to put these back in just to ensure, and it keeps things kind of consistent for what we're trying to achieve, which is shelf-stable items to have for the just in case down the road. So originally when I started this video, my intention was to have them in in just half cup increments, and could use them to bulk up a recipe or just make a little bit of something. At this point, it will probably just go all of this into one, all of the soup into one, and then we would just make a meal of that. So the sauce probably isn't enough to have a meal for all of us, but once again, you can make things as runny, like thinner sauces as you want. So by doing that, we probably could achieve a meal with just a very thin type sauce, as this was actually pretty thick since we cooked this down ourselves. So we'll put this back in and add more dry time, hoping that the additional hours at this point, it's not really a question because everything was very close to being done and dry, but just don't want to risk it after the avocado incident that we recently had, and of course that long double triple cycle from a previous video, which is almost a repeat at this point, but not quite, because I didn't cancel and we're just able to continue on. So current 25 hours of runtime for the cycle, I went ahead and added it so overnight. So that's just to ensure, and I can adjust if I make it down before that. I added 13 hours and everything will be nice and dry. So we will try this again tomorrow with hopefully a better outlook of things. We will see you in the morning. It is now day 3 of our freeze drying cycle, and our freeze dryer is now done. We will get our last 2 items out and package them up. The first item I went ahead and pulled out was our tomato sauce. It was just the top one, and since it was probably done last night and I had just shoved it back in since I wanted to make sure, I have no doubt that we are good to go. It's going to go into a Mylar bag, and I have our impulse sealer right here to accomplish that goal. And I am not entirely sure how fast we'll get to use this. That's why I'm going for the Mylar. I would like to try it sooner rather than later, because we could do this with all of our sauce and then keep it in powder form instead of keeping it in jars frozen. We have not jumped into the world of canning things yet, but I know it's hot on our list, and if you have any pages that you'd like to share with us, you know, tips and tricks of step-by-step guides of how to do that, I would be very appreciative of that, since it is a new venture that we have yet to start. So we'll get these into a bag for now. It might be kind of wasteful at this point since we could be using this pretty soon, but it's just to get some practice on it, and I didn't bring any other utensils down to break it apart. So we'll go ahead and put these in here. So there's approximately 1.5 cups of sauce, obviously with no moisture. So when we go to rehydrate this, that is the amount that you would want the product and water to get to. Like I had said earlier in the video, this was a thicker sauce that we did, so if I wanted to make it go further, like to make it go for 2 cups, I would just add that much more water to it and it would be a thinner sauce. And that might be something that we do. I mean, it's just an experiment to see how the flavor tastes after something that we made, dehydrated, or I'm sorry, freeze dried, and then rehydrate it to see, because keeping it in powder form takes up a whole lot less space than keeping it frozen in our freezer. So we'll get these sealed up. Impulse sealer, as I always do, I do it twice. I do above and below the notch. We're going to make sure, yep, we're at the right marker between 7 and 8. And I didn't write on the bag first, so that'll be a fun thing to attempt. Second one, always nice and quick. So I'll get this labeled quickly, and like I said, I'll be putting as much information as I can so we know what we're dealing with. I went ahead and labeled it as spaghetti sauce homemade, so I know it's the one that we did, and the amount originally of 1.5 cups and today's date. We'll go ahead and get our next and last tray out. Here is our soup, many cycles through at this point. We will go ahead and get this packaged up also in a Mylar bag. And we have learned many things through doing the soup and sauce. Mostly keep them in the smallest increments possible. That might not be the easiest thing if you're trying to portion it out if you don't have all these different tools. They make lots of different things for freeze drying now, dividers and things to separate for servings that are directly on the tray. It was something that I would definitely consider based on how kind of disastrous in a way that this whole process went. But also, you could just pour your entire soup amount on your tray like we have done with milk, like we have done with scrambled eggs in the past. So I just, of course, always like to add as much as possible to get the most out of different things, but sometimes in the long run that's not really helpful because it took us like 3 times as long to complete our task. We'll do our impulse sealer. Double sealed, and we will label our bag as I forgot to do it before again. And we have our final item packaged. Once again, I put what it was and how much, 1.5 cups, and today's date for packaging. Well, here's our awesome outcome of the video today. The 2 items that we just completed packaging and our things from our previous day of apples, duck eggs, oatmeal, and our delicious herbs of dill, rosemary, and sage and thyme. These will be added to the jars that we have upstairs already, but we are going through them quickly, and I love the way that they taste. It's so much better than just having it dried. There is quite a pack, a punch of flavor. So the oatmeal I hope to try really soon so we can continue doing that, and that would be quite a time saver. But as I've said, the one that I was most excited about was doing the duck eggs with our preparation video to show kind of the process that it takes. I wanted to find out truly what a good ratio was. As I've said before, the chicken eggs just always seemed a little thick, so I hope to try that again and do what we did with this. Weigh them prior to freeze drying them, and then weigh them after, so we really can get an idea of how much moisture is being taken out, because a 1-to-1 ratio I don't think is accurate, but we will find out, and that's pretty much what I've seen on lots of people's suggestions when I looked at it originally. But we will keep trying, keep experimenting. If you have ideas or things that you'd like to see freeze dried, please let us know in the comments. But we appreciate you watching the video today. If you are not subscribed yet and you like the content that you are seeing in this video and the other ones we have on our channel, please click subscribe. But in the meantime, we hope you're doing well and definitely hope to see you in the next video. Bye!